The Barron's Dictionary of Banking Terms defines a certificate as a paper establishing an ownership claim. So right there, we notice that everyone with a birth certificate is defined as being owned.
But the problem is the fellow mankind had no identification paperwork because they were not trained in the bankruptcy, and so they carried on with their birth certificates and maintained the slavery of the status quo, what they would normally do. They were not trained and educated. It wasn't until we created the claims of the life to create a substantial fact that we are no longer docking on this planet through a birth certificate, which gave us our tangible facts to control our weights and measures and how we convey contract. So it's a very important thing to be cognizant of at the end of the bankruptcy. This is what happened. So when they announced the night of November 7th, 2000, when they announced that they had a problem with the Florida Chads, we can't announce a president. We got to vacate. Are y'all buying this? Bankruptcy's ended, but we're not going to tell you. And they moved to the function into a foreign vessel in dry dock called the U.S. Supreme Court. As a foreign vessel in dry dock, they just vacated the will of the people. But they didn't have to follow the will of the people anymore because the charter was gone. It was an attempt to take over this country. I was the only citizen in this country with a legal and lawful bill of the lading for the identification of a flag, for the identification of a constitution, and for the identification of myself to give closure that I was here for open for business. They vacated and then attempted to kick a ruse off. And that's what the 2000 election was actually about. Yeah, and it was an attempt to catch all the people and create a new slave market. And I didn't want that to happen. So I did something about it. The night it happened, and then the night they announced it, I had a big dinner with my grandma. My grandma was so excited. She believed that I was going to go back to school, become an orthodontist. She was convinced of it. And then when they announced it, at the time she was 90 years old, when they announced it, her jaw dropped. She looked down at her placemats. She looked at me, and she told me I was smarter than anybody she's ever met. She says, you're smarter than everyone I've ever met. No one can predict that like you. She goes, I believe everything you're saying. There's nothing more that I can do in my life because you are you're my lineage here. You know more about what's going on than me. I'm 90 years old. I've been here a long time. Choose the right partners. Blah. She told me. At the time I listened, but I was so excited I couldn't hear. I didn't get it till years later. But I was so excited because I was caught up in the matters of what I was doing. I couldn't hear the wisdom in what my grandma had said. And I think a lot about that now. I think a lot about that. So it happened. And I didn't know how they were going to react to me when I went back to D.C. My first attempt to go back to D.C. after the bankruptcy was on January 15th, 2002. I went with he was at the time my corporate partner, David Winkle and Miller. And he had some paperwork that he had to turn in. And I had some paperwork of my own that I had created because when the bankruptcy ended, the IRS was kicked out of the United States. I knew the secrets, and so I figured out as a federal figured out how to become during my battles with Mr. Hall. He taught me how to be a judge inadvertently because those were the trails and the doors that and the secrets that I was opening. And I learned how to order the courts open and hold trial, put things on calendar, and I took on the IRS as my first as my first manifest enclosure to who I was as a postal-in-inspector, because I'd quantumized, and I'm the only citizen of this country that has a signed document with the clerk of court as a judge for the vacation of the duty for the performance of the taxes. And it's in Casper, Wyoming, and then I took that judgment and I filed it all around the world, and set up right after I'd done that, I set up, realized that the head clearinghouse for all courthouses in the United States and worldwide was the Universal Postal Union in Bern, Switzerland. And I started a quantum postal union in Bern, Switzerland off of that judgment, taking that judgment and banking it over into a trust for our own postal union. There were 3 of us on as original shareholders. In the original shareholding contract, we filed under generation virilities. Generation virilities meant that our offspring would function with facts as facts. You know, we wouldn't have birth certificates, social security numbers. You know, we would function in a quantum grammar format. David's family did not, and the other gentleman's family did to a point, and then they vacated at a later date. And so I was the only one left with the 100% stakeholder, shareholder of the postal union that I had created, because David's family chose to walk a different life, right? And for whatever reason. And the other gentleman vacated it as well at a later date, which we'll get into a little later in this summary here. Before I get into the first time back to Washington, D.C., the first thing that I did when I filed as Postmaster General is I mailed myself into Canada without a passport, with just my claim of the life, my shipping manifest, and I gave 3-day notice to Canada Customs up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. When I got off the plane, they gave me their customs declaration form. I syntexed their forms to be 100% fraud. Put the syntax key code on there, me and this other gentleman. We walked up to the front desk and said, "We found fraud on your paperwork." So you're using Canada as a verb here. So there's no such thing. There's no such location anywhere in any dictionary for the Canada to function as a verb. This is very good. It does not. And they took a look at my paperwork. They put their Canada Customs stamp on my stamps and my quantum contract, and we got shipped into Canada. On the way out of Canada, when we got to the United States, again, we syntexed the customs declaration forms, told them it was 100% fraud. As soon as we walked up there, they said, "Postmaster Gould." I said, "Postmaster General Russell-J. Gould." They took my syntax forms of red ink of their forms, they ripped them up and they threw them in the trash, and they said, "For you, it's like the Bruce Springsteen song, 'Born in the US of A.'" I said, "Very good, very good." And they all stood down, and I walked right into this country, or into my land, back into my landmass, so I could walk wherever I wanted to go. So that was very unique. The first time I went back to Washington, D.C., like I was saying, was January 15th. That was July of 2001. That was July of 2001. I did the customs thing in Canada. So